Hi there, tubers. Old Man Tech here. My next build is this 1984 Celica Supra. To continue in my quest to make models of cars I've previously owned. I actually had this car around 2006. It was a snappy little booger that was fun to drive. I can see with my car being black, the challenge will be to come up with a look of pinstriping, you know, the red pinstriping on the side and on the back, to break up the black as well as other features. Okay, the parts looked really good, and they give you 2 dashes. I freaked out originally because I seen this dash and oh man, that's European. And then I looked further and noticed that they had my dash, so that's really cool. There is no engine with this model, which is fine. You can see you need to detail, do some painting on the bottom for the oil pan and the transmission and so forth. There's no ability to adjust the rear end to get a little rake on it, so I hope it's got a little natural rake to it when I put it together. However, without the engine to detail, there is a little man. There's his head right there. That's something that'll be new for me to try and detail that. Well, I'll decide whether I'll use him or not depending on how good he turns out. On the body, I can see I need to do a lot of digging in on the doors and the hood, the trunk, to give it more of a realistic look. There's nice looking tires and rims included. Look pretty much like what I had on the car. I left these unopened because there's still a bunch of little parts in there and stuff I didn't want to lose until I'm ready for them. Alright, let's see how close I can get to come with this model looking like the car I once owned. At this stage I've finished just about a whole day of digging in the doors and the back lid, the hood, to get it to where it looks a little more realistic. Also, there was plenty of mold marks, mold lines I guess you'd call them, on this body, coming all the way down on both sides here and across the top on both sides and on the front fenders. You could just see a mold line, so I had to sand all that stuff down. Got that all complete, and these here that you see are the covers for what's going to be the headlights later on. I imagine they attached them on there so that when you painted them, you'd paint them all at the same time. So not a bad idea on that. Okay, we can move along from this tedious stage and see what's next. Okay, at this stage, we've got the fender flares attached to the body and the primer coat on, several primer coats on. We're going to let that settle in for about 4, 5, or 6 days before we try and paint it. And as mentioned before, there is no engine with this model, so I have painted the bottom of the chassis. It is what it is. Kind of cool in a way. The steering is adjustable. These aren't glued in. There's a little tab in here that moves the linkage on the wheels. So if you would ever want to have a stance where the wheels would be turned one way or the other, I guess you could do that. Other than that, I don't see much use for it. But it is what it is. Now let's move on to the next steps. Okay, the good news is I've got the chassis all done. Got her all put together pretty much. That is the good news. The bad news is I totally screwed up the paint job on this. As you can see here, I got it soaking in 91% alcohol. It hasn't even been 24 hours yet. But if you could see with the picture, it did look like I painted over sand. I used an airbrush I used Tester's Black, and I mixed 1:1 with some lacquer thinner. I don't know if that was so much the problem as it was, distance from the air gun, how much fluid I had coming out, the air pressure, and all those factors that you have to deal with. And I'll admit, I am no expert on using an airbrush, that's for darn sure. I can do okay on the small parts, interior parts, and I've done pretty good with acrylic, but this is a new thing for me with the enamel. Now, what could I have done different? I don't know. Leave me a comment. One thing I probably could have done is pulled my needle out a little bit more on the airbrush to allow more fluid to come out, and maybe it would have gone a little wetter, a little more even. I don't know, but definitely a learning experience. I guess I needed to learn this lesson too. Probably all of us do at one time or another. But you can see I've got quite a ways to go yet to get her down. But hopefully we can salvage this project. Otherwise, this is a bust, and I wasted a bunch of time. But I'm not going to accept that. We'll see if we can get her back to where I can get her painted again. And I'll probably use a rattle can on it, just because I know I can get the consistency on there thick enough and still remain glossy. So we'll see how she goes. Okay, it's a full day's job getting it back to where I can prime it again. As you can see, there's still dark on it. Bear in mind that Rust-Oleum will etch into the plastic to some degree, so you're not going to be able to get it all out. So we'll put some primer on her and see if I did a good job or not. Well, it seems as though I may have salvaged the body. Got a couple good coats of primer on here again. And I got one or two little dimples, but that's no problem. I can sand them out. So, anyway, on with the build. Well, before I move on to a finish coat, I got a flaw here you should be able to see, which is really going to show up when I put the final coat of gloss black on it. What happened was I got a little aggressive with a rotary tool in my haste and burnt through some of the plastic. Hopefully you can see here and here little dimples. So we're going to see if we can take care of that before we move on. Going to take a little bit of this Tamiya putty. Ooh, coming out already. We're going to try and very carefully to put some filling in it. I got a little piece of plastic card here I cut off. We'll let that dry. We'll come back hours later and see if we can sand her down. While that putty's drying, we're going to make some little sanding blocks. We're going to cut some of that up, and we're going to take the smaller pieces, glue them to it, and then we'll glue sandpaper on this side so that we can just kind of like the big boys do, just kind of keep it nice and straight and just sand nothing but what's beyond the little indentation. So we'll continue with that. On the grit for my little sanding blocks, I'm going to be using 400, 600, and 1000. So we'll get them glued up. Okay, next we're going to separate them and we'll trim them around the wood. Little sanding blocks all glued up, and they're all marked for whatever grit they are, 400, 600, and 1000. So we'll start with the 400, and basically we're just going to very carefully try and work that putty down until we get to where we need to stop, and we'll go from there. I believe I got those low areas taken care of on the door, those indents from one of my screw-ups, and now we can proceed with the finish coat of paint. At this point you can see I have done my pin striping, the hood, and on the two sides, and I'm working on the back now. Just to show you how I'm doing this, the tools I'm using, I've got some enamel paint here by Revell, and I'm using an old, for an applicator, an old CoverGirl highliner. I've found that this brush works just great for retaining and holding the fluid in it so that you can apply it. It took me probably an hour and a half or so to get all the black out of here and get the brush cleaned and everything else. So I'll show you what I've been doing in order to accomplish this. Take the lid off here, and where's my little scoop? I'm just taking a little scoop of this paint, putting it in my little mixer tray. I'm going to clean off the excess, take a little lacquer thinner, put that in there, and we're going to mix it up. You want it like consistency, like skim milk. You don't want it to glob on the end of the brush. If you get that consistency right, then we're just going to follow our area we got taped off here. Old man shaking too much here. We'll rest it on the table here a little bit. See how that just flows so nice using this kind of a brush. I'm doing this with magnifying glasses, otherwise I wouldn't be able to do this in front of the camera. There, we have the paint applied. Remember to clean your brush right away after use. I'm going to put this back on. We're going to wait just a couple minutes. Alright, I let it dry a couple minutes off camera. What I used for tape was this, I believe it's Tamiya 2mm. It's really good for curves. Now we'll pull this tape off. Pull it off pull it off at a little angle. Like so. Try not to scratch the paint here. And voila, there's our pinstripe on the back end. Now we've got the whole car done as far as the pinstriping. Got some other details to do, and we'll be back with that. Here we finally have the body all detailed out, as you can see. The headlights, decals, pinstriping. The other side of it, the top. I have found black to be the most challenging of my models to, get things right. Mistakes, everything shows up really bad on black. Kind of an interesting model in many ways. Like I mentioned before, the wheels, the stamps can be changed. Then they give you a little push rod to go in this hole so that when the body's together, you can reach underneath and actually bring up the headlights if you want that look. I always thought these cars looked kind of cool with them big old bug eyes sticking up going down the road, but it's pretty cool. Kind of cool little features on it. So let's quit fooling around here and get this thing put together. Come back for the final reveal. Okay, finally made it to the final reveal of my series of cars I've previously owned. 1984 Toyota Celica Supra. I think it turned out okay. Definitely had some problems. I hope I never do a black car again, but it's a learning experience, along with the weather stripping and everything else I did on it. So we'll put it in this stance here, and I'll show you here a picture of the car that I owned, and we'll see if I come out pretty close. Other than that, this is another model for the books. Thanks for watching. Old Man Tech out.